All right, man. So we got some breaking news. So we have Kamala Harris surging to new heights currently in the polls right now. So favorability ratings are actually really important for presidential candidates. They're actually super important for incumbency elections. It's pretty easy to predict towards the end, like whether or not the incumbent is going to win. A lot of people were really struggling with the idea of Biden winning because his favorability was so low, his approval rating. You need like a certain level of approval to be able to win. I think it's like in the 40s and 50s. You have to be in some like range basically. Otherwise, you're almost guaranteed to lose, and there's almost like a perfect predictor rate. So favorability is really, really important. So what we have here is it says Kamala Harris hits positive approval rating for first time in over 3 years. Realclearpolitics. So we can see in this Realclearpolitics poll average, Kamala Harris's favorability has hit positive for the first time in 3 years. They said this wrong, by the way. It's not approval rating; it's favorability rating. They're actually different. Favorability is how favorable you're viewed by the people. Approval is how much they're approving of your job, which is two different things. So what we have here is we can check out the numbers here. So in RCP, and I actually don't use RCP anymore. They include a lot of the low tier pollsters like Rasmussen. 538 doesn't include them, and they actually, funny enough, seem to have like a anti-Kamala bias in their aggregators. Their aggregators are almost always like less than what the other ones are. So it's funny that they're in this situation, but they have a plus +0.9 spread now, so almost a full point favorable. So she's 48.2 favorable to 47.3 favorable. So there's still about like close to 5% out there who currently have no opinion. So how those people are going to end up determining their favorability is going to end up determining whether or not she stays net favorable. Being net favorable as a national politician is very, very difficult. So it's a pretty massive feat right now. But what we can see here is, so right now she's up plus +0.3 on September 8th, we can see there. And then we see how negative it was. So this is actually pretty interesting too, because we can look at this. So she was positive going into 2020. She had a positive favorability all through here, all through 2020. Her favorable is solid. And then she goes into the administration, and then randomly it just takes a drop. I'm not sure if this correlates exactly with like Afghanistan, or I can't remember if Afghanistan was like in August timing, or if it was just some like bad press that she was getting with the border news. But funny enough, this is actually the expected value was to get back to this point. She was actually really high. Having these numbers, as sort of like the vice presidential candidate and such, are pretty solid numbers. They're pretty good. Those are pretty good numbers. And then we see all of a sudden on June 23rd, 2021, it just starts to fall off of a cliff, and it just effing tanked. So 50.8 to 38.7. So also what we see is a lot of the problem there in this kind of a scenario is a lacking favorability as opposed to just unfavorability, because even if you were to full it out with 50.8% unfavorable, you would still have about 49% favorable, which would put you really, really close. So a lot of it was honestly her unfavorable lagging compared to her, or her favorable lagging compared to her unfavorable skyrocketing. And so what we could see is once she became the nominee, there's this staggering, unfathomably intense increase, unfathomably quick increase we can see here, to the point where she's actually net positive now. So also we have other aggregators we can look at as well. So people have been waiting for the 538 model to actually flip as well. So this is the next one to also flip, but it took a little bit of a downturn. So we can see here, same kind of numbers pretty much. And then there's just sort of this large sort of situation. But what you can see again is the issue is not really a super high unfavorability, because it was just slightly above 50, but it was just sort of her favorability was severely lagging, right? And so I guess predictably this ends up going up, and what we can see is a sharp increase, and we're getting really, really close. So on July 4th, 2024, her unfavorable is plus 17.6, and then as you can see, it starts to get down. By July 31st, it's 7.4 unfavorable. By August 9th, it's 5.6. By August 20th, it's 2.4. And then on September 9th, it is plus 0.5. It had actually gotten to the point where it's plus 0.1 on September 6th. And then now it's up to 0.8 unfavorable. So we'll have to see how these numbers pan out. YouGov, for some reason, doesn't seem to be too big of a fan in terms of the favorability numbers. There also appears to be a pretty strong variability in these numbers as well. A lot more variability than what we see in other kinds of polling data. Why that is, I'm not sure why the variability is so high. Looks like if X is like sort of the random variable for favorability, E of X squared minus E of X squared is massive. Not sure why, because you have polls that would be like +3 and then +7s very regularly, +4, +5. I mean, that's incredible swings of like 12 points, which is nuts. You just don't see those in other polls typically. But the YouGov poll will be unfavorable 3, then it'll be here 1 is even, so the registered voters is 3. The likely voters is +7 here, favorable 7, etc. And so kind of jumping back and forth. But I think a lot of the YouGov polls will kind of be lagging, so this one will be unfavorable +4 and a sea of favorables. So I think YouGov is looking at unfavorable again, unfavorable again. YouGov is like really hoeing Kamala's numbers in the favorable numbers, because they just like they'll be the only ones in like a sort of small local area of like a bunch of positives. But nonetheless, this will be the next counter, and what we saw what happened in the debate. So we're in a post-debate era, post-first debate era now. According to the CNN poll, this was actually the response. So 63% were in favor of Kamala Harris emerging victorious. 37% were in favor of Donald Trump emerging victorious. This is the post-debate numbers. In the pre-debate numbers, it was predicted to be a 50-50 split. So Kamala Harris increased her margin by 26 points because she went from a tie to being up 26. However, this was lagging compared to the first performance that Biden performed in 2020, in which his margin was higher actually, so it's 32 as opposed to 26, and then same with Hillary and back in 2016, in which she ended up emerging victorious by even more, right, by looks like 40 plus points. So a lot of 35 points here, so 35 points she ends up winning by, so lagging a little bit. I don't think Kamala Harris gave you anything to vote for, and so how is that going to help your favorability? Is that just going to tank Trump's favorability? Another impact we want to look out for is Trump's favorability is really important. I do firmly believe if Donald Trump hits a certain low and it looks like his favorables are going down, or we'll have to see what it looks like in the Decision Desk HQ numbers, but his unfavorable right now is 9.6. I'm a firm believer if Kamala Harris gets to 50% favorability and Donald Trump is at 42% favorable, there's no possible way for him to emerge victorious in the election because it's too far of a gap. Now, Hillary Clinton did end up losing even though she had the favorability advantage. However, the caveat is she was not at 50%. So I think if she hits the 50% threshold and then he's stuck at 42 or less, I think she will emerge victorious. So we'll have to see kind of how these numbers pan out. But he's down to 43 in these numbers. But I want to see what these look like here. So for Kamala Harris in the Decision Desk HQ numbers, it looks like the unfavorable has slightly taken over at this point in their aggregate. So the aggregators are differing in their numbers by a little bit. But you can see the unfavorable has taken over by 0.2. So the CNN SRS is +1, YouGov +3. Their numbers, how they get to, like, when you look at these numbers, how you get to the unfavorables, I'm not sure. I think it must be this +11 unfavorable that's skewing the numbers, because otherwise these numbers just don't really make sense to somehow average out to that number. So I think that this is biased from this CNN poll that's just like horribly like random, like +11 unfavorable. The variability, like, just so random. It's obviously an outlier poll, so she's net favorable. There's just that +11 that's just ruining the numbers in terms of the average. So it's getting skewed by those numbers. But let's also take a look at Trump, because I've been looking at Trump's numbers on here. So his favorability has gone down, which is really awesome. So his favorable has dropped to 43.4, which is really huge. I think his favorability actually took a boost after the assassination attempt plus Joe Biden's debate, because kind of around that time, it seems like, late June, we can see he's sort of stuck in these 42s, 41s, and then boom, he starts to surge, right? And the surge continues all the way up to 45. I do believe there's a large difference between 42 and 45 for him, especially considering that Kamala Harris is pretty close to 50%, if not already there. And so the CNN SSRS poll that dropped has an unfavorable of +12. The field date was September 10th. So this his favorability may be dropping. We have a couple of +10s, but we'll see if these are kind of like an outlier poll or not. But if his favorability continues to drop, watch out. And the debate might have an impact on his favorability numbers as well, because Kamala Harris didn't give any voter any reason to vote for her, but Trump definitely gave a lot of reasons why to vote against himself. So let's see if the favorabilities drop after the debate. We'll keep an eye on that, because again, I firmly do believe it's going to be a big predictor as to what's going to happen in the race. So big news, we got Kamala Harris reaching a new high in the favorability numbers in RCP, and Donald Trump reaching new lows in his favorability numbers for a while. So this is the highest in 3 years, it looks like, for Kamala Harris. She is net favorable, even in the aggregator that's typically more unfavorable towards her.